Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about something that we all struggle with, things that hold us back. These are habits we've nurtured, embraced, and accepted, but today, it's time to let go. There are 6 habits you must quit to move into your future, to step into who you were always meant to be. Procrastination is a silent thief that steals our time, energy, and potential. It promises comfort in the moment, convincing us that waiting until later is a harmless choice. But in reality, procrastination is a trap. It whispers, you can do it tomorrow, as if tomorrow will somehow be a better time. The truth is, tomorrow is a lie. It will only be another version of today if we don't change the habits that delay our progress. We convince ourselves that we need more time, more preparation, more resources, or the right circumstances. But the reality is that waiting for the perfect moment only keeps us stuck in a cycle of doing nothing. Time doesn't wait for us to be ready. It keeps moving. The longer we procrastinate, the further we drift from our goals, the more our dreams fade into the distance. Procrastination convinces us that we have all the time in the world. It disguises itself as a temporary setback, but the longer we give into it, the more it becomes a lifestyle. We begin to lose sight of our purpose. What starts as a small delay eventually grows into a major roadblock, blocking us from achieving what we are truly capable of. We look back one day, only to realize how much we could have accomplished, how much we could have done, had we simply taken action. One of the most dangerous things about procrastination is that it feeds on our fear. Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of things not being perfect. We procrastinate because we think that delaying the task will somehow reduce our risk or protect us from making mistakes. But in reality, avoiding the task only prolongs the pain of facing it. The longer we wait, the more daunting it becomes. And what starts as a simple task grows into an insurmountable mountain. What happens when we procrastinate is that we start to prioritize comfort over progress. We convince ourselves that we're too tired, too busy, or too overwhelmed. But the cost of this comfort is high. Every time we delay taking action, we trade the possibility of success for the temporary satisfaction of avoiding discomfort. Yet true growth only comes when we face the challenge head on, no matter how hard or inconvenient it may be. Procrastination also fosters a sense of shame. We tell ourselves that we should have started sooner, that we should have done more by now. But this cycle of guilt only deepens the procrastination. We feel like failures because we haven't acted yet, and the shame piles on top of the inaction, making it even harder to get started. It's a vicious cycle that leaves us paralyzed, unable to take the first step. But here's the reality: procrastination doesn't make things easier, it makes them harder. The longer we wait, the more we pile onto our plates, the more we complicate things in our minds. Action brings clarity. Action breaks the hold that procrastination has over us. The only way out is through, one step at a time. Negative self-talk is one of the most destructive forces in our lives, often working silently in the background. It's that voice inside your head that constantly reminds you of your inadequacies, your failures, and your limitations. It tells you that you're not good enough, that you're not worthy of success, and that you'll never be able to achieve your dreams. This voice, however, is not the voice of truth. It is the voice of fear, doubt, and insecurity. The real danger of negative self-talk is that it becomes so familiar, so ingrained in our daily thoughts, that we start to believe it. We begin to define ourselves by the harsh things we say to ourselves. We tell ourselves, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable, I'll never be able to do that. These thoughts start to shape our identity. The more we believe these lies, the more they become our reality. When we allow negative self-talk to dominate our minds, we start to see ourselves as weak, unworthy, and incapable. But these thoughts are not who we truly are. They're just words created from our fears and past experiences. Negative self-talk doesn't just stay in our minds, it influences our actions too. When we tell ourselves we're not good enough, we start to avoid challenges and opportunities that could lead to growth. We hold ourselves back because we don't believe we can succeed. We start to play it safe, to settle for less, because we've convinced ourselves that we don't deserve anything more. This creates a cycle of stagnation where we're too afraid to try, too afraid to fail, and too afraid to believe that we could achieve something greater than what we've settled for. Another insidious effect of negative self-talk is how it affects our self-esteem. Every time we speak negatively to ourselves, we undermine our sense of worth. It's like having a constant internal critic who's always there pointing out everything that's wrong with us. Over time, this erodes our confidence and makes it harder to take risks, pursue our goals, or put ourselves out there. The longer we listen to this negative voice, the more it starts to feel like the truth, and we begin to shrink back from opportunities because we don't think we're capable of handling them. One of the biggest lies that negative self-talk tells us is that we're alone in our struggles. It isolates us, making us feel like we're the only ones dealing with our issues, our flaws, and our imperfections. But this is far from the truth. We are all flawed, all human, and we all face challenges. No one is perfect. No one has it all figured out. Yet negative self-talk convinces us that we're the only ones who don't have it together, leading us to withdraw, hide, and avoid connection with others. We might even push away the support and encouragement we need because we feel unworthy of it. The real tragedy of negative self-talk is that it keeps us from stepping into who we were created to be. When we allow ourselves to believe these negative thoughts, we stop seeing the potential within us. We lose sight of the greatness that lies just beneath the surface. Every person has the ability to do incredible things. But if we let negative self-talk control our thoughts, we will never fully realize our potential. Instead of seeing ourselves as capable, powerful, and worthy, we see ourselves as failures, as people who don't deserve to succeed or be happy. The voice that tells you you're not good enough is not your true voice. It's the voice of fear, discouragement, and lies. What's even worse is that negative self-talk doesn't only impact our own lives, it impacts the lives of those around us. When we speak negatively to ourselves, we begin to project that negativity onto others. We become more critical, less supportive, and less encouraging. We start to mirror the very things we're telling ourselves, and that affects how we relate to the people closest to us. Instead of lifting them up, we pull them down because we don't believe in our own worth, let alone theirs. What we fail to realize is that the way we speak to ourselves directly impacts the way we show up in the world. When we believe the lies of negative self-talk, we stop believing in the possibility of change, growth, and success. The truth is, you are more than the negative things you say about yourself. You are more than your mistakes, your failures, and your limitations. The way you see yourself shapes how you engage with life. And if you continue to believe the negative messages that flood your mind, you will never fully step into the person you were always meant to become. People-pleasing is a silent trap that many of us fall into without even realizing it. It begins as a desire to be liked, to fit in, or to make others happy. But over time, it evolves into a pattern that controls our actions, our decisions, and even our sense of self-worth. At first, it might seem harmless. We think that by saying yes to others, we're being kind, considerate, or helpful. But the truth is, people-pleasing slowly strips away our authenticity and our ability to live in alignment with our true values. The core of people-pleasing is the fear of rejection. We are so terrified of not being accepted, of disappointing others, that we begin to suppress our own desires and needs in order to keep everyone else happy. It becomes a constant juggling act of saying yes when we really want to say no, agreeing with how and when with our priorities, and bending ourselves into pretzels just to avoid conflict or discomfort. The truth is, this fear of rejection and desire to be liked often causes us to lose sight of who we truly are. We become so consumed with making others happy that we forget what makes us happy, what we need, and what we stand for. One of the most damaging effects of people-pleasing is that it leaves us feeling drained, unfulfilled, and disconnected from ourselves. The more we try to meet everyone else's expectations, the less energy and time we have to focus on our own well-being. We stretch ourselves thin, trying to be everything to everyone, and in doing so, we rob ourselves of the space to pursue our passions, dreams, and personal growth. People-pleasing creates a false sense of connection, where we start to believe that our worth is defined by how much we can do for others, rather than who we are at our core. We become people who serve others, but we fail to serve ourselves, and in turn, we can never be our best selves for anyone else. What's even more dangerous is that people-pleasing can lead to resentment. When we constantly put the needs of others ahead of our own, we start to feel like our own desires are unimportant. We begin to feel unappreciated or taken advantage of, and this breeds bitterness. We may smile on the outside, but on the inside, we're seething with frustration and dissatisfaction. Over time, this resentment can grow into anger and emotional exhaustion, leaving us feeling empty and disconnected from the very people we tried so hard to please. Another issue with people-pleasing is that it often leads to a loss of boundaries. We become afraid of saying no, afraid of setting limits, because we think that doing so will make others mad or cause them to pull away. But what happens when we don't set boundaries is that we allow others to dictate how we spend our time, energy, and emotions. We let other people's needs and demands take priority over our own, and eventually we end up with nothing left to give. We can't pour from an empty cup. And when we consistently prioritize others over ourselves, we're left feeling drained, exhausted, and disconnected from the things that truly matter to us. People-pleasing also undermines our sense of self-worth. We begin to tie our value to the approval of others. We measure our worth by how much we can do for people, how many favors we can do, or how much we can accommodate their requests. But here's the reality: your worth is not determined by how much you give or how much you do for others. You are worthy simply because you exist. When we constantly seek validation from others, we give away our power and place our happiness in the hands of people who may not even appreciate us the way we deserve. What often goes unnoticed is that people-pleasing doesn't just affect us, it affects our relationships too. When we constantly try to please others, we rob them of the opportunity to engage with the real us. We wear a mask, pretending to be someone we're not, just to fit in. True connection can never happen when we're living to please others. It only happens when we show up as our authentic selves. Relationships built on people-pleasing are shallow and one-sided because we're not being real. We're giving away pieces of ourselves, hoping that people will like us in return. But we never give others the chance to truly know who we are. The truth is, people-pleasing is an attempt to control how others perceive us. We want to control their feelings toward us, to keep them happy and ensure that they see us in a positive light. But we can't control what other people think or how they feel. People will always have their opinions, and we can't base our worth on them. The more we try to control others' perceptions, the more we lose control over ourselves. People-pleasing robs us of our autonomy, our ability to make choices based on our values and needs. Instead, we make decisions based on what we think will keep others happy, even at the expense of our own happiness. Ultimately, people-pleasing is an illusion. It promises us acceptance, approval, and love, but what it really does is keep us stuck in a cycle of seeking external validation instead of embracing our own worth. The only approval we need is our own. When we stop living for others and start living for ourselves, we begin to step into our true power. Fear of failure is a powerful force that holds many of us back from stepping into the fullness of who we are meant to be. It's a voice that whispers in our ear, telling us that we're not capable, that we're not enough, that trying will only lead to disappointment. This fear takes root in our minds and hearts, often before we even take the first step toward our goals. It's the doubt that clouds our vision, the hesitation that keeps us stuck, and the belief that if we fail, it means we are failures. What we often don't realize is that failure is not the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Failure is a teacher, not a verdict. Yet for many of us, the fear of failure feels so overwhelming that it paralyzes us, keeping us from even attempting something new or bold. We live in a society that places a high value on success and perfection, so we fear that failing will somehow disqualify us, diminish our worth, or label us as incapable. The idea that we might fall short feels like a threat to our identity, our reputation, and our sense of self. This fear is amplified by the stories we tell ourselves. We begin to imagine worst-case scenarios, replaying every possible mistake or misstep in our minds. We create narratives where failure leads to rejection, embarrassment, or the complete collapse of our dreams. We get so consumed with the potential for failure that we forget to consider the possibility of success. And in that constant focus on what could go wrong, we forget that failure is not a permanent state. It's a temporary setback on the path to growth. One of the most damaging effects of the fear of failure is that it keeps us from taking action. We become trapped in the what-if game. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail and look foolish? What if I invest all my time and energy and it doesn't work out? Instead of moving forward, we become paralyzed by these thoughts. We hold ourselves back, waiting for the right moment, the perfect conditions, or the guarantee of success before we take any real steps. But the truth is, there will never be a perfect moment. The conditions will never align perfectly. The only way to move forward is to take action, even if it's imperfect. Fear of failure also limits our potential because it prevents us from stepping outside of our comfort zones. We cling to what's familiar because it feels safe, but growth happens outside of our comfort zones. It's when we take risks, make mistakes, and push ourselves beyond what we thought was possible that we truly learn and grow. If we let fear dictate our choices, we will stay in a cycle of sameness, always playing it safe, never testing the boundaries of our capabilities. The real danger is not in failure, but in never trying at all. Another aspect of fear of failure is the way it distorts our relationship with success. We begin to believe that success is all or nothing, that if we don't reach the highest point, we haven't succeeded at all. But success isn't a destination, it's a journey. Failure is just one part of that journey. It's the bumps along the way, the lessons we learn, and the resilience we build that shape us into who we are meant to be. Without failure, there is no growth. We cannot develop strength without struggle, wisdom without mistakes, or perseverance without setbacks. This fear also feeds into perfectionism. The pressure to get everything just right, to avoid making any mistakes, can become overwhelming. We set impossibly high standards for ourselves, believing that failure is the worst thing that could happen. We become obsessed with getting everything perfect before we even begin. But the truth is, perfection is a moving target. It's an illusion that keeps us from taking meaningful steps forward. We get stuck in the cycle of overthinking, over-preparing, and overanalyzing, hoping that if we just get everything perfect, we can avoid failure. But perfectionism only keeps us from ever starting, from ever reaching our full potential. The fear of failure is often rooted in the fear of judgment. We worry about what other people will think of us if we fail. We're afraid of being ridiculed, criticized, or seen as less than others. But the truth is, people's opinions of us are not as important as the opinions we have of ourselves. The judgment of others should never determine the direction of our lives. Failure doesn't diminish who we are. It's not a reflection of our worth or value. It's simply part of the process of trying, learning, and evolving. We need to stop giving so much power to the potential opinions of others and start focusing on the lessons we learn from our own experiences. What's even more paralyzing about the fear of failure is that it keeps us in a constant state of self-doubt. When we fear failing, we constantly question our abilities, our skills, and our worth. This self-doubt clouds our confidence and makes us second-guess every decision, every choice, and every action. Doubt makes us believe that we're not capable of succeeding, but in reality, it's that very doubt that keeps us from trying in the first place. It's a cycle that feeds on itself, and the more we doubt, the more we hold ourselves back. Lastly, the fear of failure can rob us of joy. We become so focused on avoiding failure that we forget to enjoy the process. The pursuit of our dreams should be about the journey, the experiences, the growth, and the joy of trying something new. But when we are gripped by fear, we miss the beauty in the steps along the way. Fear of failure keeps us from embracing the adventure of life and the possibility that something beautiful can emerge from every experience, even those that don't go as planned. We forget that failure is not something to fear, it's an opportunity to learn, to improve, and to keep moving forward with greater wisdom and strength. Perfectionism is a silent enemy that keeps many of us stuck in a constant cycle of striving and dissatisfaction. On the surface, it may seem like a good thing, a desire to do our best to achieve excellence, to produce work that reflects our highest standards. But underneath that desire lies a toxic mindset that holds us back, keeps us from fully embracing our potential, and keeps us paralyzed in a constant pursuit of something that doesn't even exist. Perfectionism is the illusion that anything less than flawless is unacceptable, and it can be crippling. At the heart of perfectionism is a fear of failure. We fear that anything less than perfect will be judged, criticized, or deemed unworthy. We tell ourselves that if we don't do something perfectly, we won't be good enough, that our work won't be valued, and that we'll be seen as incompetent. This fear keeps us in a state of constant comparison where we measure our worth against an impossible standard. Perfectionism is the belief that our value is tied to our performance and that the only way to be worthy is to do everything flawlessly. What perfectionism does is create a never-ending cycle of striving for an unattainable goal. The moment we think we've achieved perfection, we find a new flaw, a new area to improve upon. It's like chasing a moving target. You can never quite reach it. This constant striving for perfection leaves us feeling exhausted, drained, and defeated. We pour all our energy into making something perfect, but we never feel that sense of completion because the bar keeps getting raised. Instead of feeling accomplished, we feel like we're constantly falling short, constantly not enough. Another destructive aspect of perfectionism is how it leads to procrastination. The pressure to get things perfect can be so overwhelming that we delay starting at all. We become paralyzed by the fear of not doing something perfectly, so we avoid doing anything at all. We tell ourselves that we'll start once we have everything figured out, once the conditions are just right, or once we feel more prepared. But the truth is, those conditions will never align perfectly, and by waiting for perfection, we only prolong the process. Procrastination is the child of perfectionism, the idea that you have to have everything exactly right before you begin. When in reality, the process of doing is where growth happens. Perfectionism also robs us of the ability to enjoy the process. When we are so focused on the end result, on the final product, we miss the beauty of the journey. We become so obsessed with the outcome that we forget to appreciate the steps it takes to get there. Perfectionism turns every moment of effort into a source of stress, anxiety, and self-criticism. Instead of celebrating the progress we're making, we're constantly measuring it against an ideal that doesn't exist. This takes the joy out of doing, leaving us in a constant state of dissatisfaction, no matter how much we achieve. The pressure of perfectionism also affects our relationships. When we demand perfection from ourselves, we often place the same unrealistic expectations on others. We expect them to meet the same impossible standards, and when they don't, we become frustrated, disappointed, or even resentful. We also fail to connect with others authentically because we are too busy trying to present a perfect version of ourselves, hiding our flaws, and pretending that we have it all together. In doing so, we miss out on the real beauty of connection, the imperfection, the vulnerability, the shared experiences that make relationships meaningful. In many cases, perfectionism is driven by an inner critic, a harsh voice inside that tells us we're never good enough, no matter how much we do. This inner critic is relentless, constantly pointing out every flaw, every mistake, and every imperfection. Instead of encouraging us to try again or to learn from our mistakes, the critic condemns us, making us feel like we're not worthy of success or happiness unless we can be perfect. This voice can become so loud and so persistent that we start to believe it, internalizing its messages of inadequacy and self-doubt. What's more, perfectionism can lead to burnout. Because we demand so much from ourselves, we overwork, overextend, and push ourselves to the brink of exhaustion. We set goals that are unrealistic and hold ourselves to impossible standards. And when we inevitably fail to meet them, we feel like failures. This creates a cycle of exhaustion, frustration, and disappointment. We end up sacrificing our mental, emotional, and physical well-being in the pursuit of something that's unattainable. The result is that instead of achieving the success we want, we find ourselves burnt out and disillusioned. Perfectionism also prevents us from learning and growing. It makes mistakes feel like catastrophic failures, when in reality, mistakes are often the greatest teachers. When we fear failure and imperfection, we avoid taking risks or trying new things. We play it safe, keeping to what we know, staying within our comfort zone. But true growth happens when we step outside of that comfort zone, when we embrace the messiness of the learning process, and when we allow ourselves to make mistakes. Perfectionism keeps us stuck in a fixed mindset where failure is seen as a dead end rather than an opportunity to grow. This also leads to the feeling of never being satisfied with what we've accomplished. Perfectionism tells us that our best is never enough and that there's always room for improvement. We don't celebrate the wins, the progress, or the successes along the way because we're constantly looking at what still needs to be fixed. Instead of recognizing and appreciating our achievements, we dismiss them as not good enough because they don't meet the impossible standards we've set for ourselves. Perfectionism robs us of the ability to celebrate success, leaving us always striving and never satisfied. What perfectionism fails to acknowledge is that imperfection is a natural and beautiful part of life. It's through our flaws, our mistakes, and our challenges that we grow, learn, and evolve. The idea that we need to be perfect to be worthy or valuable is a lie. Our imperfections make us human, make us relatable, and make us capable of deep, meaningful growth. True success isn't found in flawlessness. It's found in progress, resilience, and the courage to keep going despite our imperfections. Clinging to the past is one of the most insidious ways we limit our potential and hold ourselves back from moving forward. It's a natural human tendency to look back, to reminisce about the good old days, or to wish that things could have gone differently. Sometimes we get so fixated on past events, whether they were successes or failures, that we lose sight of the present and the opportunities that lie ahead. The past, while important, should never define who we are or dictate our future. When we cling to the past, we are tethered to something that no longer exists, and we miss out on the possibility of the life that is unfolding before us. One of the most common ways we cling to the past is through regret. We constantly replay past decisions, missed opportunities, and mistakes, wondering what we could have done differently. This constant cycle of regret keeps us trapped in a loop of what if and if only, preventing us from living in the present moment. Regret tells us that the past holds the key to our future happiness, But it's a lie. The past is gone. And the only power we have is in how we choose to move forward. Constantly looking back keeps us from embracing the future and prevents us from seeing the possibilities that are available right now. Another way clinging to the past shows up is through nostalgia. There's nothing wrong with remembering the past with fondness, but when we idealize it or long for it as the best time in our lives, we lose our ability to fully engage with the present. We start to believe that the best days are behind us, that the future can never measure up to the glory of what we once experienced. This mindset keeps us stuck, always comparing the present to time that no longer exists, always longing for a past that can never return. It robs us of the joy that can be found in the now and makes it difficult to create new memories and new experiences. Clinging to the past also prevents us from healing. Whether it's holding on to past hurts, betrayals, or trauma, refusing to let go of emotional wounds only keeps us in pain. We may tell ourselves that we need to process the past endlessly, or that our pain defines us, but holding on to it does nothing but keep us stuck in bitterness, anger, and resentment. The longer we cling to old wounds, the harder it becomes to open ourselves up to the healing we need. True healing comes when we make the choice to release the past and embrace the present with the understanding that we are not defined by what has happened to us. Holding on to those old narratives only keeps us from seeing our own strength and our ability to overcome. Sometimes clinging to the past can show up in our relationships. We may hold on to old grudges, past arguments, or even the memory of who someone used to be, rather than accepting who they are now. We see people through the lens of what they did or didn't do in the past, rather than embracing the possibility of growth and change. This creates a barrier between us and others, preventing us from truly connecting with them in the present moment. We may also carry forward old patterns of behavior and communication from previous relationships, thinking that past experiences dictate future interactions. But clinging to past versions of people, including ourselves, only keeps us from experiencing the new dynamics that are possible. The past can also affect the way we view ourselves. We may get so attached to our past identity, our past achievements, or our past failures that we forget we are constantly evolving and capable of change. It's easy to identify ourselves by what we've accomplished or the mistakes we've made, but doing so limits who we can become. We may define ourselves by the labels of successful or failure, loved or rejected, but those labels are often based on a narrow understanding of who we are. Our true identity is not confined to what has happened to us or the things we've done in the past. It's an evolving story that continues to unfold as we move forward. Clinging to the past can also manifest in fear of change, fear of the unknown, fear of stepping out of our comfort zones. When we hold on to the past, we begin to resist change, believing that anything unfamiliar or new will never live up to what we once had. This fear keeps us stuck in routines, relationships, and situations that no longer serve us. We resist growth, avoid new experiences, and limit our potential because we're afraid that the future won't measure up to the past. But the truth is, change is not something to fear. It is a necessary part of life and growth. Holding on to the past only keeps us from embracing the transformation that is available in every season of life. In some cases, clinging to the past can lead to a victim mentality. We begin to define ourselves by the pain, betrayal, or loss we've experienced, and we use those past events as a shield to protect ourselves from future disappointment. We tell ourselves that we are victims of our circumstances rather than empowered individuals who can take control of our future. This mindset traps us in a perpetual state of helplessness, preventing us from taking responsibility for our own growth and happiness. The past does not define us. How we choose to respond to it does. When we release the hold the past has over us, we step into a place of empowerment and possibility. Clinging to the past also keeps us from experiencing true freedom. We become prisoners of our own memories, allowing past events to dictate our emotions, our actions, and our outlook on life. True freedom comes when we let go of the need to control the past and fully embrace the present. It means making peace with what has been, accepting that we cannot change it, and choosing to move forward with hope and confidence in the future. The past may have shaped us, but it does not have to control us.